Hello everybody, and welcome back to MoodTube. I'm your host, Paul Malamud. First off, I'd like to welcome you to a little thing we like to call No Shave November. Now, if you didn't know what I was going to start this week's episode off with, then you don't know me at all. That was an incredible win by the Jets on Sunday against the Saints. That game reminds me exactly of the Jets teams that went to the AFC Championship games in 2009 and 2010. Incredible defenses and a great rushing offense. The thing is, this year we've got the best kicker in the NFL in Nick Folkera, but the biggest difference is that Geno Smith is a much better quarterback at this stage of his career than Mark Sanchez was. As for the people who are claiming that after Smith's performance in the win over the Saints, that he is only Sanchez 2.0, I say shame on you. Smith has proved that he is capable of winning a game where he has to carry the offense on his back. This was a completely different game plan than anyone they've had for him so far this season. Playing against the Saints, you can't ask a rookie to out-duel Drew Brees when his only weapons are David Nelson, Greg Salas, and Zach Sudfeld. After the bye, the Jets offense will get back Kellen Winslow from suspension, and Santonio Holmes and Jeff Cumberland will most likely be back from injury. The Jets have a very winnable schedule the rest of the season, and barring a collapse, I think all signs point to them making the playoffs. Jeremy Curley will be back from injury before the end of the regular season, and if they can make it to the postseason, the Jets can absolutely do damage. I'm not going to sit here and predict that it's going to happen right now, but all I'm saying is that it's not out of the question that the Jets could be playing a game at JetLife Stadium this coming February. The other games that I want to talk about from this past weekend are the 3 primetime games. On Sunday night, the Texans went up big on the Colts in the first half, only to have Indy storm back and win it. Enough credit cannot be given to Andrew Luck and T.Y. Hilton for the offensive show they put up in the second half. They proved to the rest of the NFL they are capable of being a potent offense without Reggie Wayne. However, while the turning point of the game was halftime, it wasn't with the Colts offense. When Texans head coach Gary Kubiak was sent to the hospital after suffering a mini stroke on the field, they not only lost the leader of their team, but their offensive play caller. If Kubiak was on the sideline and calling plays in the second half, I think Case Keenum and the Houston offense would have scored more than 3 points in the last 30 minutes of the game. On Monday night, we saw one of the most action-packed battle of the backups we've ever seen. Josh McCown did make enough plays to win the game, and Seneca Wallace missed on enough to lose it. But this game was about the running games and the defense. Both Matt Forte and Eddie Lacy were exceptional. They both put their teams on their backs and did their best to try to carry their squad to victory. The difference is that when it really counted, the Packers defense let their team down, and Mark Trestman had the stones to go for it on 4th down on his side of the field in the 4th quarter. Forte ran the clock out, and the rest was history. Lastly, we come to the Thursday night game between the Dolphins and the Bengals. I was ready to anoint the Bengals one of the best teams in the NFL, let alone the AFC. But they showed me they cannot be trusted. Andy Dalton put up big numbers in the passing game, throwing for 338 yards, but he also tossed 3 interceptions, and his only touchdown of the game was a pick 6. The Bengals are capable of being a great team, but they're also very inconsistent. Now from talking about the Dolphins being the Bengals, we progress to the big story in the NFL, Bullygate. I'm going to start this off by saying that I personally despise Richie Incognito as a player. Watching him play against the Jets these past few years, I truly, flat out, don't like him. I think he's a dirty player, and I'm not on his side, but I do think he's being unfairly persecuted. It's funny that to me, the most insightful thing I've heard about this saga comes from another former Dolphins player that I hated seeing the Jets play against, Ricky Williams. This isn't a direct quote, but he said that sometimes you just need to get out of the NFL. I had to get out, but I didn't need a scapegoat in order to walk away. Now I'm using those as the words of Ricky Williams. I think this is exactly what's going on here. A lot of current and former NFL players have skirted around this issue, but I think that Jonathan Martin is flat out too soft to play in the NFL. It is nothing against him as a person, but some people just aren't cut out for it. Just like some people who have the mindset to play in the NFL but aren't physically gifted enough to make it, can't do it. It goes the other way. I wouldn't want someone on the offensive line protecting my team's quarterback and leading the way for my running back who doesn't have a nasty mean streak in him. And if an NFL player doesn't have the stones to stand up to a bully, then I don't think they have that mean streak needed to be an offensive lineman in the NFL. Now, I'm not saying that you can't be a smart and well-mannered guy and succeed in the NFL as a lineman. It's actually the opposite. I think offensive linemen are generally some of the smarter guys on every NFL roster. But you still need to have a mean streak in you. I'm not saying Martin had to punch Incognito in the face. There are ways of standing up to somebody that don't involve violence. But the fact that Martin's way of handling this was to cry uncle and fight back through the media tells me that he doesn't have it in him to be an NFL lineman. As for the nasty voicemail that Incognito left Martin, I cannot claim to know what it's like to be called the N-word, and I may be wrong about the nature of the call, but there have been countless times that my friends have, out of jest, said things just as nasty to me as those things that were said in that voicemail, and I don't take it personally. I know it's a joke. And I'm sure there are things that I've said that if they were recorded and used out of context could destroy me. It's the nature of the kind of friendship that a lot of guys, especially the alpha male types that make it to the league, have with each other. Now, the only people who know what really went on in the locker room are the Dolphins players. And so far, until today, they're pretty hush-hush about it. But thanks to reading some tweets from New York Post reporter Bart Hubbuck, we got a little insight into what they think is going on. Ryan Tannehill, he quotes, "Richie Incognito was the best possible teammate I could have asked for." He continues, quoting Tannehill on outsiders' criticism of a lack of team leadership on this situation. Tannehill says, "Nobody knew there was a situation to be stopped." Did Tannehill think that Martin needed toughening up, he asked? No. Tannehill said the controversy is a big surprise, a shock, because Incognito and Martin had such a tight relationship. Dolphins wide receiver Brian Hartline said that the truth is going to come out. He continued, Hartline says the Dolphins player feel like you guys in the media are bullying us actually. Hartline says Incognito feels betrayed by Martin for leaking the voicemail. Hartline is outraged, he probably continues in another tweet, because he says Martin was passing the voicemail around earlier in the year and laughing about it. Hartline continues, and he insists that Incognito isn't a racist, labels the question ridiculous, and said he doesn't even understand it. Now I'm just reading Hubbuck's quotes. Offensive lineman for the Dolphins, Tyson Cabo, tweets, Hubbuck said, that Martin needs to stand up and be a man. I don't know why he's doing this. Hubbuck continues with Clabo, saying that Clabo just obliterated Martin with his teammates. I don't think there's any way Martin can return to the Dolphins. Clabo is quoted as saying, everybody's trying to make Richie out to be a racist psychopath, and nothing could be further from the truth. Tannehill, Hubbuck quotes, says they were like brothers, and R.I. was the first one to have J.M.'s back in any situation. Big surprise what's going on. Dolphins guard John Jerry, who is black, said Incognito never used the N-word around him. I would have just laughed it off if he had. Tyson Clabo also indicated, Hubbuck says, that Richie Incognito was drunk when he recorded the infamous voicemail to Jonathan Martin. So there's that. That doesn't really have anything to do with this. It doesn't matter whether you're drunk or not. You still said things. And now Hubbuck adds an interesting nugget, that Jonathan Martin lost his left tackle job to Bryant McKinney, who the Dolphins traded for from the Ravens just 3 days before he abruptly decided he had been bullied. So as those tweets show, all the Dolphins players that Hubbuck was quoting are coming to Incognito's defense. They're saying that they don't know why Martin is doing this. They're describing the relationship between the two players as a big brother, little brother relationship. That explains why earlier in the week, I saw pictures of the two of them sitting next to each other on the plane making goofy faces at the camera. And there's also some pictures of the two of them going go-karting together. As someone who had two older brothers myself, I can tell you that things are not always pleasant for the younger brother. But it's also a great relationship. If that's what you choose to call it, you could say without a doubt that I was bullied by my older brothers as a kid, both physically and verbally, countless times. But I wouldn't take a second of it back, because it turned me into the man that I am today. Furthermore, going on, I cannot possibly not address the fact that earlier in the season, Martin reportedly was showing the voicemail to people in the locker room in a joking manner. You can't have it both ways. You can't use something as a joke and find it funny, and then save it as a point of leverage later on. Dolphins players are saying they don't understand why Martin is doing this. And then we come back to the thing that brings us full circle to what Ricky Williams said about Martin needed a scapegoat to get away from the NFL. 3 days before Martin left the team, he was benched in favor of Bryant McKinney. That sounds like pretty convenient timing to me. Now, it is definitely possible that I have this all wrong, and that information will come out that sheds light on that fact. It's also possible that Dolphins players decide to come out lying and present a unified front defensive incognito. The fact that we have Ryan Tannehill, the quarterback and face of the franchise, makes me find that hard to believe. But with all the info that I have available to me at this point, Jonathan Martin seems like a person who should be receiving national scorn for throwing his teammate and brother under the bus for his own selfish reasons. Now, moving on from Bullygate, I bring us back to one of the Ask Moody questions from last week. I asked viewers to give their answer to Tom Horgan's question about which current NFL player could best replace Morgan Freeman in Shawshank Redemption. Tom said Haloti Ngata or Patrick Willis. I chose Reggie Bush. The best viewer response we got came from Crawford Clark, who said Ed Reed. I think this is the perfect choice, and I'm surprised I overlooked him. Not only does he have the look, as Crawford points out, but he also has the age and wisdom to go along with it. Now, for this week's favorable fantasy matchups. As always, this segment is brought to you by GTS Clothing. At quarterback, I'm going with Jake Locker this week. He has scored 19 points in 3 out of the 6 games he's played in this season. And this weekend, he's playing against the Jaguars. I think he's going to be in for another big game. At running back, I like Mike James. He had a big week last week, rushing for 158 yards, and he also threw a touchdown. So this week, going against the Dolphins, and that was against the Seahawks' great defense, I must add. So this week, going against a Dolphins defense that is giving up the second most points to running backs, I think he'll be in for another big performance. At wide receiver, I'm going with Doug Baldwin. He scored more than 13 points against a pretty good Bucs secondary last week. And this week, the Seahawks are playing against the porous Falcons defensive backfield. As the unquestioned number 2 in the Seattle passing game until Percy Harvin comes back, I think Baldwin will be in for a big game against Atlanta. And lastly, at tight end, I'm going with Tim Wright. He has scored over 10 points the last 2 weeks, and the Dolphins are giving up the 3rd most points to opposing tight ends. With Mike Williams out for the rest of the season, I like Wright to continue to become a big part of the offense. I think Wright is a great under-the-radar play this week against the Dolphins. And the fact that he's listed as a tight end / wide receiver in Yahoo leagues is great because it gives you the flexibility to put him wherever you have the need for him. Now, for my Week 10 picks. The first game I'm going with is the Broncos, giving up 7 points over the Chargers. I think this is going to be a shootout, but Payne's going to outduel Rivers by more than a touchdown. If the Chargers want to win, they need to run the ball early and control the clock so that they can keep Payton off the field. We'll see if they're able to do that, but either way, I like the Broncos, so I'm taking them, giving up 7 points. The next game I'm going is the Titans, giving up 12 points over the Jaguars. As I said, the Titans are playing at home and they're playing against the Jags. I think Locker's going to be in for a big week, and that's enough reason that I need to pick the Titans in this game. Titans giving up 12 points. The third game I'm going with is the Bengals giving up 2.5 points on the road over the Ravens. The Bengals looked bad last week against the Dolphins, and they still almost won the game in overtime. which means I think they're going to look great this week against the Ravens. I'm taking the Bengals, giving up 2.5 on the road. The fourth game I'm going with is a big upset. I'm taking the Bucs, getting 4.5 over the Dolphins. Now, I don't think the Buccaneers are going to go winless the whole season, and I think this week is a great time for them to get that first win. The Dolphins are drowning in the Bullygate controversy, and the Bucs offense matches up very well against the Dolphins D. The Bucs almost pulled off the upset of the year last week in Seattle, and I like them to win this one at home. I'm taking the Bucs, getting 4.5. Now for the last game, I'm taking the 49ers, giving up 6.5 points at home over the Panthers. Carolina's 4-game winning streak has everyone talking about how they could be a potential dark horse in the NFC South. However, the 5 teams they have beaten this year have a combined record of 8-33. The 49ers are coming off the bye and they're playing at home. I think they're going to come out and run train on the Panthers. Choo-choo! I'm taking the 49ers, giving up 6.5. Now for Bet Moody. With the Red Sox being the Cardinals in the World Series, I'm now 7-2 in my Bet Moody games. I'll pay that bet as soon as I get the shirt, the tiny shirt from Dom Lagars to do so. As for this week, I'm going to put my money on the Lions and bet against Bears fan Nick LeRae. Jay Cutler is reportedly going to return this week and get the start, so there's a chance I could regret this. But I think the Lions are going to take this one in Chicago. If by some chance the Lions do lose, then I'll have to get a henna tattoo of Smokey the Bear or some other throwback cartoon character that I can find a tattoo of. That's it for this week's episode. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you all next week, but in the meantime, don't forget to check out the tube, because you got to see Mood.